it's been interesting to see that the backlash against people speaking about things like toxic masculinity has meant that people have there have been various people who have kind of stood up and offered a vision of what it means to be a man, and not all of them have gone back to kind of the traditional kind of Christian view of masculinity and patriarchy in particular, but have gone in sort of a different direction. And I mean, here we're talking in particular about the what's come to be known as the manosphere, which I'm kind of interested whether that's really a very specifically sort of online phenomenon, or whether it could have happened without it. But it'd be interesting to get your sort of take on what the manosphere has sort of come from, and what have been the kind of main exponents of it, and whether it can be saved at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are various directions in which a kind of dissident masculinity took root. I mean, one of which I'll just get out of the way was Men Going Their Own Way, which was a kind of male separatist movement, which is quite interesting. So I tried to look at that in parallel to the kind of feminist separatist.
It was called sort of MGTOW or
yeah,
something.
so Men Going Their Own Ways, or MGTOW. It was a pretty small movement, to be honest, but it was men who described themselves as red-pilled, which is to say, like, they've understood the truth of reality and decided that pursuing women was just a money drain, and that there was no point in kind of engaging in heterosexuality. They were not homosexual either. They were just not interested in
actual women.
In actual women. Well, I think in many cases they might have had a bad experience with women and then generalized to all women, right? So you get a lot of those kind of generalizations, as you do with the kind of toxic masculinity thing, or all men bad, all women bad, and so on. I mean, it's very black and white. But I think that probably the more dominant manosphere trend, which then caused a lot of worry and concern, as we see with like Prevent and adolescents and so on, people getting very upset about images of masculinity that were maybe more hierarchical, more kind of non-Christian, in the sense of being like, this is about power, this is about men being strong and working out and so on. There's nothing wrong with men working out. Obviously, I think it's a good thing to try to be healthy and to look after our bodies. But that sort of thing became very right-coded, which is, again, weird, because when I was growing up in sort of more liberal thing, it was really the liberal people who were worried about food and health, because they were suspicious of like big pharma and cheap food. Do you see what I mean? So it's much more kind of hippie-ish to be like in the 80s and 70s, but then for some reason that stuff all got really right-wing coded, and silly Guardian pieces about how exercising makes you a fascist or something. I mean, just like ludicrous. But but I think that, so the difference between the kind of the Christian right and the non-Christian right, I mean, you could call it, I don't know, the Nietzschean right or something like this, is, well, first of all, a discussion about souls, because we believe that everyone has a soul. They don't necessarily believe that everyone has a soul. And I think also their commitment to hierarchy as manifested in the world, right? That this is a material instantiation of hierarchical difference, and that would include the superiority of men over women in some ways. But I think that...
But that was sort of based on kind of power, essentially, strength.
Yeah, a sort of idea of power, many different ways of thinking about it. But I think the backlash to it, unfortunately, made it more attractive, if you see what I mean, because when you have entire governments and bodies and NGOs and schools panicking about Andrew Tate or whatever, and no respect for Andrew Tate, I think he's a terrible human being, but you create allure and transgression, so they did not handle this well at all. And that drew a lot of young men into to watching those kind of videos, and which do contain a kernel of truth. This is the reason why they're effective, because some of the truths that were not allowed to be spoken in the kind of liberal environment were being spoken and then kind of taken in unpleasant directions in the sort of manosphere, as it were.
Yeah, because I mean, could you Would it be possible maybe for those who are not sort of locked
Yeah.
into the online discourse, sort of give a little bit of a summary of what, maybe that kind of Andrew Tate style sort of idea of masculinity is?
I suppose it's an idea that men are kind of inherently dominant and domineering, and that their job is to, and that the women are kind of chattel or people to be manipulated. I mean, Andrew Tate did apparently convert to Islam. I mean, there's a kind of, I'm not sure he was particularly devout. He may not be Muslim anymore, but I suppose it's this idea that there's almost like a celebration of polygamy as well. The idea that men deserve more than one.
Well, there's certain types of men, sort of, kind of alpha males that deserve everything that they can get, basically.
And it's, I mean, worse than that, it's a kind of pimp model, right? I guess that sort of men like Andrew Tate sort of deserve to control women and make money off them and manipulate them and so on. And this is how you express your masculinity, is through kind of force and domination.
But I mean, that I think that's all true, that what you're saying there. But if that were all it was, it would be kind of odd that he's become so popular, because those are sort of repulsive ideas to, I think, the vast majority of people. But there's something else going on which seems to be sort of get people interested, which is probably more kind of reasonable, or more what people are kind of looking for. What would you say kind of that is?
Well, I suppose that the kernel of truth would be to say, well, men and women are different, right? Well, and first of all, even to acknowledge that there is sexual difference. I mean, this is also one of the problems with this sort of liberal madness, and I was on the left, and up until I don't know, quite a long time at this point, I wouldn't necessarily say everything is political in that way, but definitely the point at which, how to put it, the reality of sexual difference stopped being important for the left. And these was people who were supposed to be kind of historical materialists, looking at the way in which, class and sex interacted over time. And they just kind of gave up on all of that. And they were no longer materialist, apparently. They were kind of completely idealist. No, these are just ideas that anyone can join. So I think, in the first place, all you have to do to counteract that and to seem attractively oppositional is to restate basic truths.
Right.
So that's a problem.
Okay.
Because the moment anyone says, well, okay, here's some reality, and you go, yeah, of course, then you're kind of like already in that frame. So, yeah, I think talking about sexual difference already puts you sort of in a intriguing position, right? Especially for young people, if they're being told, well, you can't discuss these things, or you're being offensive if you use these words or whatever.
So the very fact that the one wasn't allowed to kind of point out the obvious, it allowed people like Andrew Tate to become, basically sort of speaking truth to the kind of craziness of the world.
Yeah, and I think if you're a young man and you're constantly being told that your masculinity and your way of behaving is somehow wrong, then of course you're going to look to someone who says, no, you're being oppressed by this, ridiculous system that is trying to crush your energy. So I think we did see a lot of that, right? The idea that young boys' behavior was somehow aberrant and they needed to change who they were even as children, which is...
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting kind of area, because one of the things that sort of people who've been studying outcomes, especially for boys in school and to a certain extent in the workplace as well, have noticed that basically it's the boys who have been sort of getting worse and worse, and their exam results have been getting worse, school attendance, even general kind of mental health, earnings, all of those things have been kind of on a downward slope. So, I mean, what do you think? I mean, that's something that you kind of spoke about in the book. So, what do you think has been really the and where has it been worse in terms of the mental health and achievement for young boys in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's broadly speaking the absence of a role, and then people telling you off for who you are. I mean, this is obviously going to make you first of all unhappy, and then probably quite angry. I mean, I wrote quite a lot about male suicide, which is obviously very high. It tracks my generation, Gen X, really badly for some reason. I think my generation was oddly had high suicide rates when we were younger, and now it tracks us. We have the highest suicide rate as well, and I don't know why that is. Maybe a lot of drugs and alcohol, maybe a kind of weird hedonic moment in the 90s, like the end of history. I don't know. There's all kinds of strange reasons why that's happening. But I think, you know, for the men that I've known who've killed themselves, I think really it's the absence of a role, the absence of a place to act in the world, you know, a feeling of kind of uselessness in front of the cosmos, you know. And I think that for men, acting in the world is kind of crucial, you know, to put it very simply, right? To see your work reflected back in the world, from the world. And it doesn't mean that every man has to have a family. It doesn't mean that every man has to achieve anything. But I think when those things are kind of completely cut off, or they appear not there, then you're...
Or kind of demeaned as well.
Yeah, and then you're just sort of demeaned by virtue of your very existence. I mean, it's like telling people off for who they are. I mean, it's absurd. You know, the idea that men are somehow fundamentally wrong for existing.